Hey, everybody. You are about to hear a brief retelling of the movie Cass. Enjoy the movie. It's based on a true story. Deptford, South London, 1993. Two types are about to take down Cass Pennant for being black and a West Ham supporter. One of the thugs pulls out a gun and fires 3 shots at his target. We go back 20 years. 3 young West Ham United fans were walking down the street until they saw a crowd of Wolverhampton fans beating and describing their comrades. The lads ran off, but were blocked on their own. They laughed at the pussies and rushed to beat their faces. The youth decided to support the men. At that time it was a top West Ham firm, and their leader was Stephen. Cass gladly took part in the massacre. The big guy was only 14 years old at the time, and for the first time he felt part of something big and important. Up until that point, things hadn't been very happy. A 49-year-old white woman decided to adopt a black infant named Carol. At 10 years old, Carol dreamed of looking like everyone else, but no matter how much soap he rubbed on himself, the boy never got whiter. There were 3 hooligans waiting for the black boy in the overpass. The smallest of them was also the most horny. They kicked Carol and made Russian jokes about seeing his mom in the zoo, and he himself had to go back to the jungle. But that day for him stood up for Freeman and Prentice. They inspired him to pile up. From then on, the trio was always together. Another school uniform ruined. Mom doesn't have that much money to buy a new one every time after a fight. The boy swears and swears at his mother. He hates his girl's name. Because of it he gets even more. The boy asks to be named after the greatest boxer Cassius Clay. Dole agrees, but in return she asks her son to stay out of trouble. Once before a soccer match, the boy was brought to the pub by his adoptive father. Cecil is a big West Ham fan, though the center-backs didn't like the fact that a black kid fell into their den, but his father stood up for the frightened boy. He asks his son to stay close to him today so the drunken fans don't hurt him. For years have passed since then, but even after the fight with the Wolves, Cass refuses to be allowed into the pub. Steve Hogan solved the problem, and now 10 years later Cass's friends have become respectable people. They socialize with a dangerous bandit Ray, who is looking at a dozen high-security robbers. Freeman unsuccessfully joked about the term and Ray began to fix it. The poor guy almost pissed in his pants until the bandit did not laugh and did not make it clear that it was a joke. On normal days, the whacked-out soccer hooligans were simple laborers on a construction crew. Frantes worked in an office, but just like his friends he looked forward to Friday all week to get away during the brawl. Eventually the showdown grew in size and the firm became known as Intercity Firms, ICF. Their gang was the youngest in London and their main enemies were the lead service crew. Both crowds greeted their enemies with shouts, Big Cass being ahead of his gang as always. While the home side fought back in their own backyard, some of the Malotaballs fans popped into their pub and trashed it frantically, bringing fresh press to their friends. Fucking Chelsea is on the front page as always, not just page 4. Freeman's naked girlfriend came out of the bedroom and called Cass a filthy animal, for which the buddy kicked her out into the street like that. Cass is upset, but his mind is more on planning his next attack. He's going to get even with Newcastle for the bombs they were pelted with last season. We need to attack them the day before the game and take them by surprise. Trinity met a journalist who decided to tell viewers about one of the most cruel farms in England. The report was seen by Cass's parents. He says that although the firms are a hotbed of racism, this is the only place where he was accepted. He's also trying to prove that they're not criminals, just a bunch of men who want to get loose sometimes. After a hard week's work, some of them smoke, some of them drink, some of them punch faces. Cass is proud of his interview, plus he got paid 50 quid. His mom is now worried that the police might show up at any moment. Cass declares that he is not going to spend his life working like his foster father. He wants something more, and even Margaret Thatcher has talked about the problem of soccer hooliganism. Cass examines the fighters and the weapons they came in with. He weeds out the dead and the young. The selected hooligans are loaded into transport and driven to their enemies. Newcastle, who were partying at the club at the time. Cass sets the fighters straight, Tonight they will earn credibility and show everyone which firm is the main one in Britain. The crowd broke into the establishment and made a terrible mayhem. Unlike the opponents, they had weapons, so the massacre was quick and brutal. That's how Cass got the first ever long sentence for soccer hooliganism, namely 4 years in prison. The black man was given the dirtiest uniform, but when the warden found out that he was the component in front of him, his attitude changed immediately. There were already 2 other black cons in the cell. The aggressive one was fixing the small one and attacking Cass, saying he was talking like a white man. The black racist is too frosty on the subject, so he was sent back to Africa by Cass. A fight broke out between the ambassadors. At one point the neighbor pulled out a blade, but then cooled down and lay down on the bunk. That's how Cass found himself in another cell, but then the neighbor also began to rub that the big guy should learn his culture. Cass did not like it in prison. There were no sewers, so he had to shit and brush his teeth in a bucket. One day Cass was brought to the cell of an authority figure, who turned out to be his old acquaintance Ray. He'd just been transferred here. The bandit got straight to the point. He found out that nobody finances the firm, just a bunch of dreamers, and Cass could easily raise hundreds of experienced bulls and a couple hundred youngsters if necessary. Ray offered him to go into business, but Cass doesn't want to get dirty with crime. Thanks to his friend, the bully got privileges and started working on a draft, a book about the soccer subculture. A neighbor asks if Cass wants to find his real parents, but the bully doesn't care about them. His mom and dad live in London, period. The bully was released in '86. He was dumbfounded by the fact that he can only take out of prison the property that he had when he was imprisoned. This applies to the drafts that he wrote for several years. With undisguised pleasure, the warden threw the notebooks into the trash, and the book could have been his ticket to the future. Outside the firm, the members of the Aussies greeted their leader. There was a nice girl, Elaine, who had come to the pub for company with a friend. She calls all the people here assholes, but she's got her eye on the big guy Cass, and he's got his eye on her. But then Freeman started egging her on. At the same time, a skinhead got under her friend's skirt. The verbal altercation turned into a hand-to-hand fight, and the woman ended up on the floor. Cass wanted to chase the scumbag away, but was rebuffed and decided to let everything go on the brakes. The disgruntled lady was taken out, but her friend Cass caught her and treated her to some wine. Cass came to his parents late at night. His mother hopes that the bully has learned his lesson, so now he will settle down and find a job. Suddenly Cecil freaks out and insists that his wife tell Cass that those who abandoned him want to contact him. His real parents are from Jamaica, but as before, Cass insists that they are his family and he's not going to read letters from some strangers. The big guy brags about getting a girlfriend. He's never been so nervous before a fight as he was before a first date. Freeman even put a pound on his buddy screwing up. Ellen invited Cass to the restaurant. He was shaking. It was his first time in such an establishment and he had no idea what was written on the menu. The girl was surprised that he didn't pile on the skinhead then, but that wasn't exactly true. Cass ordered the same thing as his friend. Ellen warned Cass that he was about to get lamb's eggs. The prospect of eating a reach scared the big guy, but the girl admitted that she was playing a joke on him. Ellen immediately warned Cass that she wouldn't be able to date him if the bully continued to participate in the weekend brawls. A year went by. A bunch of cameras were put up in stadiums, so attacks started to happen just on the streets, and SE members were the most desirable targets. The Arsenal fans attacked Francis and cut him with razors. The mutilated man had to have 1,000 stitches. Ellen is disgusted by all this talk and walks away. Freeman accuses his friend of trading the firm for a girl. Cass is going to plan everything carefully and take revenge on her attacker. She complains to her friend that she has fallen in love with Cass, but his loyalty to West Ham spoils everything. When the girl came to visit him, Cass raided the fans of the Cannonballers. They beat up the scumbags, but during the fight, the center was stabbed in the groin. Ellen was in the apartment when her friends dragged Cass home. She cried and screamed as she wished Cass would quit. He has some kind of unhealthy attraction to violence, and if he continues, he'll either go to jail or play the box, and she wouldn't want to raise a child alone. She's pregnant. Ellen asks the man to get a job because she can't feed them all on maternity leave. That's how Cass decides to come to Ray's and make him a business proposition. Ray has a lot of nightclubs all over London, and Cass can find him as many bouncers as he wants, and he'll only do business with him directly, without any security. Freeman doesn't like having to wear a suit. Good thing he has one for the courts. The cronies took the new job because it was too dangerous to stay at ICF. They were threatened with 10-year sentences for their involvement in the soccer riots. Thatcher made good on her promise, and the soccer mayhem in its original form faded away. But the nightclubs were packed to the gills. The Casa provided Ray with the biggest and badass black guys. He made his wife happy, and his life fell into a peaceful routine. The couple is raising a 5-year-old son in their home, and soon a daughter will also be born, but the old enemies have not forgotten former offenses. The scumbag who stabbed Friendless intends to hurt Cass. The big fella has driven up to the club as usual, and right behind him are the beaten Arsenal fans. Having shot Cass, they immediately took off. The past had caught up with the hooligan. The doctors doubted he'd make it, but 2 months later Cass was a goner. Ray found the thugs and suggested that Cass decide what to do with them. One day a very old Cecil came into the room and told him that his mom was gone. That day Cass picked up the unopened letters from his Jamaican parents again. Later, soccer hooligans sent him a wreath and a threatening card. During the funeral ceremony, the priest invited loved ones to say a few words about the shrunken man, something Cass wanted to do. The man thanked Doll for all she had done for him. They had never been close to Cecil, so Cass didn't even dare to put his arm around him. The old man said his son should open the letters now, but Cass had already thrown them away. Ray came over and suggested that they go after those scumbags together. But Cass decided he had to deal with them himself. He keeps getting phone calls and silence, but one day they answered and asked him if he liked the flowers. Cass had a dream that he executed the shooters. He's woken up by the police and they're still trying to figure out who shot him, but Cass isn't cooperating. The man is paranoid. He lashes out at his wife and kids. He's constantly hallucinating. When Ellen came home, she saw the broken furniture. Her husband wasn't home. Cass realized that it's time to deal with his demons and finish with those scumbags. He and his buddies drove a hearse to the pub. In the coffin, they brought cold weapons. The gang entered the pub. Cass handed the gunman a wreath and afterwards pointed a gun at him. Ray demanded that he pull the trigger, but Cass didn't commit a crime. The bully was wrong to think trouble had followed him all his life. He was the cause of it. Cass could have survived a life sentence, but he thought of his wife and kids. They don't care about his authority. His family loves him for who he is, and that day Cass realized it.